Once upon a time, there was a beautiful land located at Manchester. It is very big that it has a size of 180 acres. It is surrounded with beautiful green scenery and very suitable to develop a housing area or a park. This is where the Victorian Park Company, that was incorporated by an Act of Parliament in 1837, developed an ornamental garden and park, and also to erect housing with attached leisure grounds and then to sell the house. There were 8 majority shareholders in Victorian Park Company. And the first one is Mr. Harbottle, second Mr. Head, third Mr. Westhead, fourth Mr. Byron, fifth Mr. Bailey, sixth Mr. Dennison, seventh Mr. Bunting, and the last one is Mr. Lane. Scene 1. This is Mr. Foss. He loves drawing during his free time. While he was drawing, a figure appeared behind him and quietly tapped his shoulder. It was his best friend, Mr. Turton. As Mr. Turton sat down, he quickly flipped through the newspaper and showed Mr. Foss an interesting advertisement. Surprisingly, it was Victorian Park Company's advertisement. Feeling very keen, they both tried to contact Victorian Park Company to know more about the advertisement. Because Mr. Foss and Mr. Turton were very excited to be a part of them too. And finally, Mr. Foss and Mr. Turton got an appointment to meet Mr. Harbottle at his office. Scene 2. Upon arriving at the company, Mr. Turton showed the advertisement to the receptionist at Mr. Harbottle's office. Mr. Foss and Mr. Turton then met with Mr. Harbottle at his meeting room to discuss about the advertisement. During the meeting, Mr. Foss and Mr. Turton get a clear vision of what Victorian Park Company wants to do, which is they are selling the shares of Victorian Park Company. After a meeting, Mr. Harbottle handed in a contract to Mr. Foss and Mr. Turton to be signed on it. Mr. Foss bought 2 shares while Mr. Turton bought 12 shares, and it costs 100 each, and they have to pay 5 deposit per share. They are now Victorian Park Company shareholder. Scene 3. After the incident from the annual grand meeting, Mr. Harbottle decided to take the bookkeeping record and keep it to himself, so no one else can see it. While Mr. Harbottle was checking the bookkeeping, suddenly Mr. Foss came into the meeting room. Mr. Foss requested to see the bookkeeping of the company, but Mr. Harbottle kept on refusing to give it to Mr. Foss. And then Mr. Foss tried to grab the bookkeeping from Mr. Harbottle, and there was a small fight between them. Mr. Foss then believes that Mr. Harbottle have misapplied the company's property, and he quickly called Mr. Turton to report about the matter. Hence, they brought the case to the court, claiming that the majority shareholders has misapplied the company's property and various of mortgages were given improperly over the company's property. Calling the case Foss and Harbottle. Is the plaintiff ready?
Yes, my lord.
Is the defendant ready? Ready for the defense, my lord. Now, We will hear the opening statement from the plaintiff.
Referred to your lordships, I represent the plaintiffs, Mr. Richard Foss and Mr. Edward Stapleton. My lords and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client, Mr. Richard Foss, who is one of the shareholders of the company, wants to bring a such alleged that the promoters, which are Harbottle, Assets, Byron, Wessex and Bailey, has conspired together to profit by the establishments of the company and the aspects of the company. This being achieved by the company purchasing lands belonging to the promoters at exorbitant values, not only being charged for the rent reserved to the original land owner, but company also needs to pay additional rents reserved and payable to Harbottle, Assets, Byron, Wessex and Bailey. Furthermore, the defendants didn't allow the plaintiffs to inspect the book, account or paper of the company when the plaintiffs asked for the request. Thank you, my lords.
Thank you, counsel. Would the defendant like to give their opening statement now, or would you defer until the plaintiff rests their case?
Yes, my lord. My lord, I'm representing the defendant Mr. Thomas Harbottle, Mr. Joseph X. Head, Mr. Henry Byron, Mr. John Westhead, Mr. Richard Bailey, and Mr. Joseph Tennyson. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to the general rule of incorporation stated in Section 18 Company Act, the company is the legal person having a distinct entity from its member. So, the plaintiffs have no right to sue the members of the Victoria Park Company for the injury that happened in the company, as the members are legally separated from the company itself. Thank you, my lord.
The plaintiff's solicitor may call the first eyewitness.
Thank you, my lord. Mr. Foss, does the defendant refuse to disclose the bookkeeping record of the company to you and Mr. Tettons?
Yes.
There's no further question, my lord. Thank you, my lords.
Does the defendant's solicitor want to cross-examine the plaintiff?
Yes, my lord. Mr. Foss, do you have any evidence that shows my client has really misapplied the company's assets? No further questions, my lord.
Does the defendant have any witness to call?
Yes, my lord. I would like to call Mr. Harbottle to the stand. Mr. Harbottle, is that true? You didn't disclose the bookkeeping records to the plaintiff?
Yes,
Why didn't you disclose it?
it's easy. It's because they don't have the say in the company, so they don't have the right to inspect the bookkeeping.
There is no further questions, my lord. Thank you.
Does the plaintiff's solicitor have any questions?
Yes, my lords. Mr. Harbottle, can you state the price that the company paid for the purchase lands? There are no further questions, my lords. Thank you, my lords.
After hearing the submission from the both sides, the court decides that the proper plaintiff in action in respect of a wrong alleged done to the company is a prima facie the company itself. The plaintiffs have no rights to represent themselves to sue the directors for the wrongdoings to the company. In law, the corporation and the aggregate members of the corporation are not the same thing for the purposes like this. The corporation should sue in its own name and it is corporate character, or in the name of someone whom the law has appointed to be its representative by referring to the general rule in corporation stated in Section 18 Company Act. Order, order, order. Court dismissed.